Okay, so let's start into this. And before we get into ZBrush, what we want to do is to cover some basic character design theories. Something that we should keep in mind when we are developing this character in 3D that will help make this character really come to life and really have a great polish in the end. So, and the reason I want to talk about this, and you don't have to know 2D, you don't have to be a 2D artist to be a great 3D character artist. I work and I've met with a lot of 3D artists out there that are incredible 3D artists, and they don't have a 2D design background, but they do know and understand these character design principles. So, these are the same character design principles that 2D artists, concept artists use to develop their characters to really send the message of who the character is and give an instant relatability to these characters. So let's go ahead and we'll talk about that, and I'll sketch around a little bit. It's not going to be anything fancy, just to try to show you what we're talking about. So let's go right ahead. So the first thing that you want to do when you're developing your own character, and this is developing your own character or just trying to realize someone else's 2D concept, is develop and understand that story. So what are we talking about when we are talking about developing a story? So let's these are the principles that you should keep in mind. Is one, who is that character rather than what the character is. Okay, for example, so you don't want to just make an old man. I mean, you can make an old man, you can make him really wrinkly, you can garb up his clothing and give him a lot of grunge, but there's not going to be anything that says who that character is other than that's an old man. But how about you focus on what this guy has gone through, and is he ravaged by the age of time because he's been in wars and he's been in struggles with poverty, or he's struggling with the loss of loved ones. There's things that you want to understand who that character is rather than what the character is. I could have easily, for this, just said, oh, let's make a cool dude, and that's it, and just started putting on a billion muscles and things like that. But that doesn't really sell the idea of who that character would be. So always keep in mind who versus the what. The next thing you want to think about are personality traits. This will help you discover who the character is. Is this character shy? Is he more outgoing? Is he adventurous? Or has he been kind of a shut-in his whole life? Or she, of course. We're going to be making a male character here, so I might be using the male. But feel free to use these same attributes for female characters because it works. And so you want to try to discover those personality traits. Is he in love? Is he, a hopeless romantic, or is the character more of a solitary person that's trying to overcome some personal issues? So those are the things you want to think about. And then also you want to know what kind of trials they may be going through, or flaws the character might have. Is the character a nerd and he wants the girl but doesn't think he'll ever get noticed or anything like that? Or is the character always been on the upside, like there's never been any problems with the character, and suddenly things are flipped around and he's going to have some trials to try to figure out who he really is because he's never had any trials. And lastly, you want to think about the time period and location. Is it going to be in the future? Is it present day? Is it going to be in space? Is it going to be in Africa? Things like that. You want all these things will help develop who the character is and that kind of look that you want to sell, or that idea that you want to bring across to your audience. You may think that, well, my audience is me. I'm making this for myself. Well, of course you are. But you also, when people see this, you want people to see this. You want people to understand and be able to relate to this character, and by understanding and developing these ideas and principles, you'll instantly have an appeal to the character. You'll have something that, oh, you know what? Hey, I understand that character because I kind of go through the same things. I mean, people do this all the time with their character design. So you want to think about that. Next, I want to talk about is, let's take this off, is shape language. And I'll be talking about shape language quite a bit. So shape language, what this is, are some kind of graphical ideals that say something about the character. Every shape has a different message that it brings. So you want to have this repeating shape or repeating message throughout your character. So let's talk about what that, the initial shape language is. Circles, triangles, and squares. So this is where I'm going to draw a little bit. And excuse me for my lack of incredible circles, triangles, and squares. Okay. So a circle. Let's draw a circle real quick. So the circle has this idea of something that is, it's very round, very soft, very, formable, I guess. So this is more comic relief. It's more the, yeah, it's exactly that. It's more comic relief. It's more sympathetic. It's very, loving even. And that's what the circle has. There's no sharp edges on there. It's very round. And so that's more or less what the circle says about itself. Now, squares say something else. When you look at a character and you see more of a square, you think more, oh, that's going to be very firm, very determined, unchanging. You go into a nightclub or anything like that, and you look at the security, and they're big squares. They're these strong, big, unmovable squares. Like that's kind of the idea that the squares will be teaching. And then lastly, you have triangles. And you can have an upside down triangle or a regular triangle, a pyramid triangle. And these also tell a very different story. These can be very heroic. You put a head on this and maybe some arms, and he's already looking like a hero. And also this can be very villainous. There's very sharp angles. Like on the direct opposite side, there's very sharp angles, and it comes across a little bit more evil and a little bit more as the villain, villainous triangles, or even the upside or the pyramid square can also be very playful, a little bit more athletic this way, as it kind of has more of a dynamic shape to it. So these are the things that these shapes tell about each other. You will see these very, very often. I mean, Pixar does this extremely well with their characters. Up is a great example. That's just a very simple example. Every single character in that is a shape. You have Carl Fredricksen, and he is a square. Like, he is just a big square, and he's the firm, unchanging old man. He's the anchor, basically. And then you have Ellie, his wife, and she's a big circle. She's loving, and she's caring, and she's also very funny and outgoing, and so that's the circle. And you also have Russell, who's a big circle. And he's the comic relief throughout the whole thing. And then you have Charles Muntz, and he is basically an upside down triangle. He starts off more very heroic as in that heroic sense of a triangle, but then his features start coming out, and he starts getting more pointy and more jagged, and he becomes just this very sinister triangle. So you want to remember the shape language when you're developing your character, and keeping this rhythm throughout your character. There's a great importance in this. There's a lot of times I see portfolios or character designs And the character looks, he looks all right, and you start looking at him and dissecting him, and you can almost cover half of the character and see that the top half doesn't match the bottom half because they stop using these design principles, this shape language throughout their whole character, and it starts to fall apart, and you start realizing, oh, well, that's probably why it's losing a little bit of appeal. It's not that the skill is there. The skill is probably there, but it's just missing this shape language and this design theory. So next is straight versus curves. And straight versus curves is just a way to have a really nice balance of appeal to it, so you don't get cluttered. When you have shapes like this, like let's say we're drawing, there'll be 2D design principles, but this translates very well into 3D. So you have a character, and he's got an arm, and instead of just this for his arm, maybe he has a hand. That's boring. There's no appeal in that. So what we do instead is we try to balance our straight and curves. You're actively thinking about, okay, so if this side of the arm is going to be straight, then the other side is going to be curved. So if you have a curve there and a straight, and then maybe you reverse it, so this side's straight, and you have a little bit more of a curve there. So you've got your straights and your curves that are never on the same. You're never doing a straight and a curve. You're never doing a straight and a curve together. So you're not making an arm like this. You're making, some flow to that arm. Even that. Even dissecting the leg and the face, you want straights and curves. If this is the profile of the hip, you're going to have the leg that has these straights and these curves. That's the knee, and that's the calf. You want straight, curve, straight. So you're creating a nice balance and a nice, nothing's getting planar, nothing's getting parallel throughout your character. You're getting these really nice, and this is what the next point is rhythm and flow. You want to have a character almost flow like water. You want to have some really nice dynamics that nothing seems like it just stops somewhere. So if we quickly draw out a character, this is, excuse my horribleness for this, but you want to have kind of a rhythm and flow. Maybe I'll do this in a different color so you can see it a little bit better. I'll do this in a different color. So you want to have kind of a rhythm, and this is what I'm talking about. And this, just is one example of how the flow works. You want an overall flow like this to start defining who your character is. Not defining who your character is, but this will just enhance your character. Showing who he is. If he's going to be more square, you still want some flow in there. You still want some overall flow. Even if it's Bowie and things like that, you still want things to just flow into each other. You want people to relate to the character without knowing why they're relating to it. And keeping these design principles will help you do that. And something that I really like to preach to people, especially people getting into ZBrush, and you always want to create your own character. There's a good desire, and there's a good need for it. Create your own character, use your imagination, push your limits. But you also want to have a clear vision before you jump into ZBrush, before you get muddled with too much detail and too much, you want to get in there and you want to sculpt up a bunch, but really you should take some good time beforehand and think out who your character is. Have that vision, and use that vision to create an appealing character in the end. I get asked quite a bit, okay, so what is it that people look for when looking at a portfolio when you want to work at a place like Disney? And I answer the same thing. As one is, you want to have your portfolio geared for the job that you want. So if you want to work at a place like Disney, then you want more cartoony characters. But you also, so if you want to work at a place that's like Halo, you want futuristic army. If you want to work at or Bungie, I should say, if you want to work on Destiny, you want futuristic armor, and you want to show that you can do more of a realistic thing. But that's this, you want to gear your portfolio towards that. The second thing that I always say is make sure that you have examples of you matching a 2D concept into 3D that's not yours. There's such a big importance to be able to match someone else's concept, because that's how you will be working, is you will receive someone else's concept, and it's your job to match that into 3D. And by knowing and understanding these principles of shape language and story and character development, these are things that will, because that 2D concept most likely will only have, if you're lucky, maybe 3 views. A lot of the time when I get stuff, it is one view. It's just, maybe a posed or a sketched out pose of the character. And I'm supposed to be able to translate that into a T-pose and then a final pose. So what I need to start understanding is who the character is, so I can start filling in the blanks, because you're not going to have all the answers there in 2D. You need to fill in the blanks in 3D. So that's why you understand these principles and start taking the answers that you have and filling in the gaps with these principles. So now, understanding these principles of character design, what we're going to do now is we're going to jump in to ZBrush, and we're going to start blocking in our character. Thank you for joining.